Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being with us. I'm Bob Thomas, Superintendent of Knox County Schools. Welcome to our Disparities in Education Outcomes Community Meeting hosted by our DEO Steering Committee. In a moment, I'm going to introduce our committee's co-chairs, but first I wanted to briefly say a few words about the committee and its work and our program for this evening. Our district adopted a strategic plan in 2019 that includes 3 goals: increasing student achievement, eliminating disparities, and building a positive culture. Our strategic plan highlights how serious we're taking the work of eliminating disparities and the importance of supporting all students in the work of education. Although the strategic plan was adopted in 2019, the steering committee's work dates back to 2016, and I'm very grateful for the community leaders who have given their time and effort for nearly 5 years now. While the community's original 5-year mandate is drawing to a close, I want everyone to know that this work is not finished. We are currently in the process of mapping out the next phase of this effort, and we will provide more guidance about that in the coming months. In the meantime, we know that one of the committee's most important roles is to serve as a liaison with the community and to provide transparency and accountability around its work. Last March, the steering committee hosted a public meeting at Fulton High School, and I was very encouraged by the feedback and input we received at that time. Much of the data we presented at that meeting focused on discipline within our schools, and you'll hear more about discipline trends later this evening. However, I do want to emphasize that our steering committee's work is not only focused on promoting equity in our discipline practices, it's also about ensuring that all students have the opportunity to achieve academic success, regardless of their life experiences, culture, or economic status. In a few minutes, you'll be hearing more about our work to eliminate academic disparities and our efforts to ensure that we pursue academic gains that are broad-based and encompass all students. As I've said before, it's very important to acknowledge that we have not achieved all of our goals yet. However, my hope is that by identifying and measuring the areas where we need to improve, we're taking positive steps toward closing achievement gaps and eliminating disparities. Members of our administrative team will be taking a close-up look at our efforts in their presentations, but before we move to presentations, I want to highlight 3 action items implemented during the past year. We have created a Department of School Culture focused on health, cultural responsiveness, trauma-informed strategies, healthy relationships, restorative discipline, and social-emotional learning. We've hired an in-house facilitator to lead our cultural responsiveness training for our employees, and we have created a Minority Advisory Council to provide insight and perspectives from our educators of color and to help us with ideas and suggestions to create a more diverse workforce. I believe that each of these concrete actions is an important milestone for the district and will have a very significant impact as we move forward. We have also continued with initiatives that were part of the steering committee's original report, including the creation of an ombudsman office, which plays an important role as an advocate for our students, our families, and our employees. In addition, I want to acknowledge that this has been an unusual school year because of COVID-19. Obviously, the work of education during this pandemic has been different for both in-person and virtual learners, but has also required us to adjust events like this. Typically, we would prefer to hold a community meeting in person, which allows us to have a two-way conversation and answer questions directly. Due to the increase in COVID cases, a large gathering is not appropriate this year, but we did invite members of our community to submit questions through email. The questions that we received will be posted on our DEO website, www.knoxschools.org/DEO, and I want to thank everyone who responded. We will be addressing some of these questions this evening. In addition to the questions that have been submitted, I think that it's very important that we provide you with information regarding the work that we're currently doing to close achievement gaps, to promote equity in our discipline practices, and to address the social, emotional, and mental well-being of all students. If your question is not addressed during our meeting, please know that we're planning to post a meeting summary on our DEO website, along with responses to the questions that have been submitted. Our goal is to post this information in early January. Finally, I would like to thank the members of our DEO Steering Committee for their commitment and dedication to promoting equity and creating a positive climate for all of our students and employees. Their work is essential, and I'm grateful to them. Now I'm going to turn our program over to the leaders of our steering committee. Toma Battle and Rosa Marr are passionate, dedicated, and persistent leaders, and I know they're going to keep us moving in the right direction. Rosa and Toma, thank you for your service, and thank you for saying a few words.
Good afternoon, evening. I just want to say thank you for joining us. This is a weird way to join us, but we're doing the best we can with what we have, right? The work that we've been involved in all this time continues, and as the superintendent just said, this is not an end, this is just a pause.
Buenas tardes, yo soy Rosa Mar. Bienvenidos a todos los estudiantes y sus familias. Esta transmisión en vivo estará disponible en video, traducido la próxima semana en el sitio web de las escuelas de Condado de Knox. La presentación que ustedes van a ver esta noche de PowerPoint también estará disponible en español la próxima semana. Si tienen ustedes algunas preguntas, por favor envíalas y las respuestas también estarán en español para ustedes. Les deseamos a todos unas felices vacaciones y, como dijo Toma, el trabajo que nosotros estamos haciendo es muy importante, así que no se desesperen y por favor siguen llamándonos y diciéndonos lo que les gusta y que no les gusta. Muchas gracias.
Good evening. I'm Shannon Jackson, and I'm the Executive Director of Teaching and Learning for the Knox County School District. And today I'm going to talk to you about some of our academic data, but first I wanted to start with our enrollment. So as you can see, we had some questions around our in-person versus our virtual attendance. And this shows you that we have about almost 70% of our students attending in person and close to 30% attending virtually in the fall. We just closed the enrollment period for the spring, and those numbers have shifted slightly. We'll be closer to 75% in person and 25% virtually for the spring. So as we set the stage for looking at the academic data, I wanted to give you some numbers for comparison. This puts us in comparison with the other large districts in the state of Tennessee. Knox County serves about 6% of the students in the state of Tennessee, and you can see where we rank fourth in the large districts around our economically disadvantaged, but we rank second or third in the chronically absent category. So we're looking at those numbers, we're tracking ourselves against the other large districts that have similar makeups to us. As we start to get into some of the academic data, I wanted to set the stage for some perspective. So NAEP, which is the nation's report card, and all of the states participate in NAEP, measures student reading and math performance in grades 4, 8, and 12. And so this has the highest ranking jurisdiction in the nation right now is the Department of Defense in both math and reading. And that top performing district is 54% of the students are performing proficient or advanced. Our state assessments align with NAEP, and so as you start to see how other states are faring, this gives some perspective on how Knox County fits into the overall picture with the nation. So Minnesota is first in math, and Massachusetts is first in reading at 53% and 45% respectively. Looking at Tennessee, we tend to trend close to the national average, which is work that has happened since 2008. So looking more deeply into student achievement, looking at our specific numbers, I'm showing you the percent of students who are proficient or advanced compared to the other districts. We tend to be very similar to Rutherford County. We're similar in makeup to Rutherford County as well. And then you can see the score I wanted to highlight for you, the 21.1 on the ACT. That's a high average for a district of our size. We have about 4,500 students who participate in a grade level cohort for the ACT, and for us to have an average of a 21.1 is a good number. However, we know that's an average, and so we have students who are not meeting that 21.1 And we are paying a lot of attention to what we can do to support students, especially looking at various patterns that can help to identify that work. So getting into some of the other metrics that were on that chart, as we break them down by our various student populations, you can see each of these bars represents a year of participation, and for the most part, we are trending in the right direction, but we have worked really hard to pay attention to our grad rate. This is highly individualized work. The counselors are working with every student to see what they need and what supports they need in order to be able to walk across the stage at the end of the school year. So then we're looking at the ACT composite by graduation cohort. This is what contributes to the 21.1, and you can see we have some differences in our various populations, and this is where we are starting to put some programming in place. We ran an ACT summer preparation program this summer. It was all virtual. We've learned a lot about how to support our students virtually. We had about 700 students participate in that program this summer. And then we have our graduation rate. So graduation rate is an indicator that tells us whether or not students have a 21 on the ACT or a combination of 4 early post-secondary opportunities, which could be advanced placement, international baccalaureate, Cambridge, a dual enrollment class, or an industry certification. And they can have different combinations. They can also participate in the ASVAB as one of the indicators for Ready Graduate. So as we look at this, we're seeing that we need to focus on some programming to help all of our students have access to those early post-secondary opportunities and to be able to achieve that 21 on the ACT. So our next slide has our 3rd through 8th math. This is looking at our percent that are on track and mastered. So you can see on the subgroups, we have some gaps to close here, and we are paying attention to this. And then we have our 3rd through 8th grade reading. And then the metric that we pay a lot of attention to is our 3rd grade metric, our 3rd grade reading, because that's the first standardized assessment that we get for our students. And so it's an indicator of where we're beginning the work. With the students, we actually begin earlier than that in kindergarten and track our information there, but this is a standardized assessment that lets us know how we need to lay out plans moving forward. So based on this data, we have some various instructional strategies that we use. Every school year, elementary students are grouped based on how they're performing at any given time. So this is a process that the teachers use very fluidly in their classrooms. Students are flexibly grouped based on what they know about the content they're studying at the moment. So after whole group instruction, the teachers will pull students into small group to reinforce, remediate, or enrich whatever the students are learning. We have core extension daily in our elementary schools. That's 30 to 45 minutes, where again, the students are getting that differentiated instruction based on where they are in the learning at the moment. We also have gifted and talented coaches who go into classrooms to support students and also pull students out for additional support. And then we have interventions, specific and formalized interventions for reading and math, English language services, and special education services for the students who need that instruction as well. One of the things we've been looking at this year is the participation rate in our response to instruction and intervention program. This is where we benchmark our students 3 times a year, looking to see where they are on grade level, and those who need additional support would go into a tier 2 for a mild intervention or tier 3 for a more intensive intervention. These are very small groups, usually 3 to 6 students. They are specific to the deficit area that is showing up in the benchmark or through the diagnostic assessments. They're scheduled during the day, every day, for 30 to 45 minutes, and that depends on the required intensity level that the student needs. We progress monitor these students, so we assess them every 2 weeks to see if they're making progress, and teams of teachers gather around to look at the information they're receiving on the progress monitoring data and anything that they're looking at in the classroom, and they form a picture of how the student is doing and whether or not they need to intensify that intervention or make some adjustments to it. And then we also graduate students from the interventions. So Tier 1 is instruction that every student in Knox County gets, and every student receives on grade level instruction, but we have looked at increasing the rigor in Tier 1. We have a pilot that we ran a couple of years ago with Wit and Wisdom. We're in our second year of this in 4 of our elementary schools, which are Chilhowie, Maynard, Green, and Saramore Green, and then 3 of our middle schools, which are Vine, that's running the longest, Halls, and South Doyle Middle School. And this is a knowledge-building curriculum that focuses on very intense, complex grade-level work. You can see a picture of the 4th grade module here that's on the circulatory system. And this is a story that uses medical terminology in a grade-level appropriate setting for students to be able to learn both their language skills, but also to learn the background knowledge that they need to know around the circulatory system. This is an example of the type of work that we are seeing the students do, and we're seeing them rise to the occasion. So our teachers have said that our students are producing great work with this, and they're able to spend their time trusting that the curriculum is at grade level, and they can use their talent and their skill to make sure that the students can reach that grade level expectation. Another one that our teachers have selected and we would like to implement is Benchmark Advance, and that is another Tier 1 English curriculum that would be very supportive of all of our students in ELA and reading, and it has a specific support for our English language learners. So when this report came out 5 years ago, I was moving into this position, and I looked at the DEO report and saw 4 places where we could really do some concrete work. So we started looking at advanced academics and set a goal of having parity of performance or participation within our schools so that the participation of our various student populations would match that of the enrollment in the schools. Then we did a curriculum review looking to see if all of the students in our school district find themselves in the curriculum and also have the opportunity to learn about their classmates in the curriculum. So we talked about having windows and mirrors, windows into other cultures and mirrors of our own, and that the people that we see in our curriculum are people that all of our students can look up to and learn from their experiences. That is part of what led to the Wit and Wisdom pilot. We have been working very hard to safeguard early literacy and to make sure that we are using evidence-based instructional strategies to ensure that our students get that early training in all the foundational skills that go into becoming a fluent reader. And then the other thing we were looking at was equity in course offerings. Course offerings, particularly in your high schools, are dependent on the size of the school. If a larger school can have more course offerings than a smaller school. So we started looking at how we can use the size of our district to create opportunities for students across our district. And that's how we came about with our very first Quest program, which prior to 2020, we had 24 courses that we were offering across our district so that students from across Knox County schools, if their school didn't offer something, they could take that course through the Quest program and either do it asynchronously where they were logging in, or in some cases they were tuning in for a 7 a.m. class with a school across town. So one of the things that became important to us in this work is to put people directly responsible for the work so that there are people who are every day thinking about if we're meeting our goals and if we are providing the supports we need for this work to get some traction. So our current work right now is looking at the early post-secondary offerings, the advanced academics. One of the things that we discovered is that we can create the programs and have them for students to participate in, but at the end of the day, it's the students and the families who decide what they will register for and take. And so we started to recognize the need for a stronger advising program starting in our middle schools so that our students and our families could start thinking about that. So we have, last year we started U-Science, which is a program. It's actually a battery of assessments that our students can take that not only looks at what they where their skills are, but it looks at where their interests are and provides them with some guidance around some various career opportunities they want to explore. We started using pre-ACT to get some early indications on where students are on the ACT and to provide some help for them. And then we're piloting a freshman seminar, which is to help students know what to do with the information once they have a career plan or looking at some career pathways, giving them some guidance around how to make those plans come to fruition. We're continuing to look at our curriculum, and this year the University of Tennessee History Department is working with us to make sure that we have a good representation of primary sources in our U.S. history curriculum. And then we are also watching our literacy and making sure that we are continuing to support our teachers with the science of reading and systematically assessing and intervening with our students to make sure that they have what they need as we move forward. So I wanted to share with you some data. We started tracking this data in a couple of years ago, and what I've put for you here are the current demographics of the Knox County School District, and then the percentage of students who are participating in the EPSOs. And these are actually our students who've earned the EPSO. So we are, and the EPSO opportunities are listed at the bottom of the slide. What we're looking for is for those numbers to be at least the same, if not higher. So where we have 0.35% of our students are American Indian, we have 0.39 participating in 2017, and we have 0.30 participating in 2020. So we're looking for those numbers to align. And we've seen, since we have been putting attention on this, that the numbers are trending in the right direction. There is a little fluctuation, but as we are putting attention on this, we are seeing more students participate. One of the things that in order for the students to be able to participate, we have to have the offerings. So this shows the opportunities offered at each school. One thing to remember is that the number of offerings are restricted by the size of the school. So this is why we have students who are able to participate across the district through our Quest program in different opportunities. So beginning next year, we will be offering a third advanced academic program. That will be the Cambridge program. And Carter High and South Doyle High have been approved to offer those courses through Cambridge International. And then these are the number of students participating in our early post-secondary opportunities at each school. So most of our advanced academic courses are available to our 11th and 12th graders. We have a few that are for 9th and 10th graders. So this shows you the number of students per school participating. Students only count once in these numbers. So if they're taking 3, they only count 1 time. But on the next slide, you can see the number of credits that each school will be offering. So in this slide, students who are taking more than 1 count each time they take one of those classes. So we're encouraged to see that for this semester, 33.1% of our students are enrolled in at least one of the following types of courses: the Advanced Placement, International Baccalaureate, Dual Enrollment, or a National Industry Certification. That is a pretty good number, considering we're looking at mainly our juniors and seniors, and there may be a few 9th or 10th graders, but it's mainly our juniors and seniors who are able to participate. Some strategies we're putting in place to support our students are AVID, which is a program that several of our schools have. It focuses on those soft skills of organization, self-advocacy, tutoring strategies, the skills that students need that aren't specific to an academic discipline, but that will transfer across all the different disciplines. We found that having the middle school programs are very important to helping our students develop the image of themselves as someone who should be participating in these courses. We also know that we have to have flexible pathways. Kids are going to change and grow throughout their academic year, and we need them to be able to move into additional pathways as they are ready for them, and for them not to feel like they're limited by the first pathway they chose. We're using U-Science to help with the advising and get kids connected with high content that is interesting to them and connected with the direction that they can see their life going post-high school. The freshman seminar, which I talked about, and then, of course, the reading, the intervention for math and reading, which is a more formalized program. So in summary, our goal is that every student leaves us with a strong base, that they have a good start and can engage in coursework that prepares them for adulthood so that they have choices in their career and in their post-secondary experiences when they leave us. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Dr. Gwinnetta Hampton.
Thank you, Shannon. It's my pleasure to be here tonight on behalf of Jason Meyer to present some highlights of our special education programs. As you can see, I'm the special ed supervisor for secondary schools. So let's start with increased inclusion rate. One of our priorities is to include students with disabilities in general education settings with their peers to the greatest extent appropriate. The focus is what is called least restrictive environment, and this is based on best practices for higher student outcomes and achievement as well as community involvement. This is grounded in special education law. We monitor the LRE data at least annually as a district supervisory team and alongside the school administrators. We provide ongoing training on using appropriate accommodations and modifications in a variety of settings. The rate that you see of 70.84% actually refers to the percentage of students with disabilities who spend at least 80% of their day in general education settings. And we have seen this rate improving over the last 5 years and expect that to continue to do so. Improved progress monitoring. We've aligned our special education progress monitoring with the general education tools in order to support high expectations. We also have provided additional assessments for special education teachers to help target specific skill gaps to improve instruction and individualize instruction for students. Expanded student programs. This is a very abbreviated list. This could be very long if I added all the grade levels, but we chose to highlight a few of our secondary programs tonight. Project Search is in its second year with Knox County Schools. This program is designed to allow older students with disabilities an opportunity to have meaningful work internships in community businesses. We're currently working with Park West Hospital and are very happy to hear just recently that 2 of our interns were hired into paid part-time positions. We continue to collaborate with the University of Tennessee to prepare students for the UT Futures program. This program provides college experience for students with intellectual disabilities while building their independence in the community. In the data that Ms. Jackson presented earlier, we saw the EPSOs, or early post-secondary options, and note that students with disabilities are increasingly participating in career technical education. In 2018-19, the CTE and special education departments began a collaborative partnership. The 3 pilot schools who participated reviewed the current data and then met with middle and high school teachers and students to promote exploration of career paths and the courses. We continue to provide training for CTE teachers and paraprofessionals on using accommodations and modifications in these career programs. This is a positive trend we also expect to see continue. Our School to Work transition team meets regularly with groups of individual students, with groups and with individual students, and they address post-secondary options and pre-employment transition services. This team also connects students and families with community rehabilitation providers. Currently, they are working on a spring virtual transition conference in April 2021. We'll have more information out as that date gets closer. COVID-19 recovery. I do want to share a glimpse of the ongoing work we're doing to support students. In addition to the district supports to help all students recover any educational losses experienced during the pandemic, the special education department continues to utilize the procedures already in place to identify the more intense special needs, and you can see those on your slide. And also, as we move into and through the spring semester, we are reviewing current progress to determine if additional strategies or services may be necessary for individual students. In collaboration with parents, we are developing virtual learning plans to clarify IEP services for those students who opted for virtual learning, as well as students who may be quarantined or have a school that has temporarily moved to virtual learning. And since last spring, we have prioritized our teacher training around virtual instruction and continue to add other online resources for teachers and families. So the final slide that I have, you can see the metrics that we review on a continuous basis. The specialized supports, this helps us determine where we need to go. The first 4 bullets you're going to hear about from other presenters tonight, so I won't go through those specifically. We've talked about least restrictive environment that's good for all students in our community, and then IEP progress. One thing we do want to acknowledge tonight is that we are constantly a work in progress. We know we always have room to improve, and I want to thank you for your time and for your community support and the input that you give us to help us continue to improve those programs. Thank you. I'm going to introduce Ina Slisher.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hampton. Good evening. I'd like to begin by briefly introducing myself since I'm new to this position. My name is Ina Slisher, and I was hired in September as the ELL supervisor for Knox County Schools. I began my professional journey as a classroom teacher in ELL, so I bring a great deal of passion and work for supporting English language learners. For those who are unfamiliar with our department, my first slide summarizes our broad goal of increasing proficiency in listening, speaking, reading, and writing for students who are learning English. In doing so, we use a tool called WIDA Access, which is essentially a matrix that helps us understand where a student falls on the spectrum of English learners. Our initial category is called entering. Then as you go down the list, students are gaining proficiency in English. These numbers will help you give you a sense of where our students fall and the types of needs that we are addressing. I also would like to highlight the incredible diversity of our district. The complete list is actually quite long, but this slide shows the top 5 languages spoken by Knox County Schools ELL students. As you can see, the most common language is by far Spanish, but languages such as Arabic, Swahili, and Kirundi reflect the significant number of families that have come to Knox County from countries in the Middle East and Africa. We also have a number of Chinese speakers with the district. In addition to language diversity, this slide highlights the fact that our ELL students are not grouped in one single school or single region, but they're spread fairly widely across the county. The big question, of course, is how we're engaging and supporting our families. I'll admit that I'm still learning about the ins and outs of the department, but I've been extremely impressed by the dedicated staff in the work on behalf of EL students and our families. This slide captures a couple of key aspects to our work. The first is our family community liaisons, who serve as a point of contact for families who speak Spanish, Chinese, Kirundi, Swahili, and Arabic, not only as they enter the district, but also on an ongoing basis. These individuals spend quite a bit of time in schools, but they also work at our Welcome Center, which provides a number of services to families who may be new to Knox County Schools. Our hope is that the Welcome Center allows families to ask questions and get answers in their own language and begin to feel connected to the district, even if they don't speak English. In addition, our department also works closely with schools and teachers to provide supports that enable them to serve all of the students. Much of my time since joining the department has been focused on mapping out the path forward and getting to know the partners who help us serve ELL families. I'm very grateful for the work of community partners like Centro Hispano, Bridge Refugee Services, Knoxville International's Network, the United Way, and Knox Education Foundation. In many cases, they may be the first point of contact with one of our families, helping them to navigate the enrollment process and other tasks. They are also very helpful in amplifying messages that we may be sharing and serving as another avenue for important information, which has been especially helpful during the pandemic. Our department has also been working closely with the KCS Public Affairs Department on strategies to ensure that district communications are available to as many families as possible. One thing we recognize is the importance of providing messaging on multiple platforms. With that in mind, the district is trying to share more multilingual messages on Twitter and our language-specific Facebook pages, and to ensure that the key district-wide emails are being translated. We know that some families may not have access to social media and email, so we have recently begun sending out Spanish-speaking families text messages with information about schools that are moving to online learning. In fact, we even shared one public service announcement related to changing student learning models for the spring on WKZX-FM, a local Spanish language radio station that was generously offered to air the announcement for free. Finally, we are in the very early stages of developing a newcomer academy, which would help ELL students who are in the beginning stages of learning English. You'll be hearing more about that later, but it is definitely an important priority for our department. And with that, I'll hand it over to Brian Hartzell, who will be speaking about discipline.
Good evening. My name is Brian Hartzell, and I serve as Supervisor of Enrollment and Disciplinary Hearing Authority for Knox County Schools. This evening, I would like to discuss our discipline plan as we work to reduce disparities in suspensions and also reduce the occurrence of students' discipline infractions. This is our approach. This is our proactive approach to changing the direction of our disciplinary data while maintaining a safe school environment for learning. We call this our PCR approach: prevention, consequence, and restoration. Prevention, giving administrators an option other than suspension, training staff on restoration, practicing and cultural practices, restorative practices, and cultural and trauma issues, dealing with those issues, giving them those trainings. Consequences, our reaction to students' infractions that are appropriate and teachable. Restoration, we feel all students should be given a second chance. And with a transition plan as they return back to school, giving them the supports they need to be successful while at their base school. Next, I would like to discuss with you the due process and the suspension procedures. Step 1, a student has been alleged infraction. Step 2, administration investigates and gathers statements from the witnesses. Step 3, if suspending a student for 1 to 4 days, consequences can be issued to the student. Step 4, if suspending consequences are 5 or more days of suspension, a disciplinary hearing must be called. In calling a disciplinary hearing, before calling a disciplinary hearing, administrations and schools must perform an S-team for a general ed student. For a special ed student, they must call a manifestation team meeting. The S-team or the support teams meeting is to gather information, the history of the student's academic performance, to see if there's any mitigating circumstances that could have been done by the school to stop this behavior from occurring. The manifestation meeting is to see if the disability of the student was a factor in him committing this infraction. These are procedures and practices that all schools must follow. We have intentionally formulated specific steps for the length of suspensions and restorative practices for students returning to their base school. Families have the right to appeal or have their suspensions reviewed. Reviews are for 1 to 4 days suspensions must be requested by the parents. Reviews are for procedural guidelines, not whether a student is guilty or innocent. Appeals are for 5 days or more and also must be requested by the parent, whereas guilt or innocent is considered. All suspensions 45 days or more are reviewed by the appeals committee. And once again, we are reviewing to make sure that the procedures and policies are in line with our new guidelines, and also the length of a suspension is appropriate for the given action or the given infraction. Next is our breakdown of our demographics by ethnicity. Now, as we move into the data, please keep in mind that this is a snapshot. Actually, as we look at the data, it'll be a 45-day period that we will be discussing. Also note that only about 70% of our students are in-person learning, whereas about 30% of our students are virtual learners. The next 3 slides are comparison numbers for the 1920 to 2021 school year and the difference in consequences in the first 45 days. First slide we have is for out-of-school suspension. Please note that the downward trend as we compare year to year, the green color notes that indicates that there's been a reduction in the number of students being suspended. The next slide shows the same comparison from the same year, 1920, 2021, 45-day period, but it deals with ISS. Once again, I note that you look at the downward trend as we compare year to year. Once again, the green color indicates a reduction in the number of students being assigned to ISS. The next slide is our Restorative Learning Center. Shows a slight increase in our American Indians and Pacific Islanders. However, keep in mind these students are still in the building and can be assigned for either the entire day, they can be assigned block by block, or in middle school period by period. The next 3 slides are the top 6 infractions that have resulted in suspension by our subgroups. Black, the top 3 categories is fighting, disruption of class or school environment, leaving campus without permission. In our Hispanic kids, the top 3 categories are fighting, disruption of class or school environment, inappropriate physical contact or harsh play. The next slide is our white subgroup. Once again, the number 1 resulting in suspension is possession, use of e-cigarettes or vaping. Number 2 would be fighting. Number 3 would be disruption of school or class or school environment. Number 1 in our 2 minority subgroups is fighting. Number 2 in our minority subgroups is disruption of class or school environment, while in our majority group is the possession of use or of e-cigarettes or vaping, and number 2 in the subgroup is fighting. We use our monthly principals meeting to help administrators identify areas to adjust or change their practices or patterns. We are hopeful that our downward trends will continue as you can see, we are making progress in our suspension numbers. However, the disparity gap is still there, but decreasing. We foresee a continual decrease in our numbers as we proceed on with our new practices. Thank you and have a good evening. At this time, I would like to introduce Ms. Janice Cook. She will come up and discuss our cultural advances.
Good evening. I'm Janice Cook, the Director of School Culture for Knox County Schools. Our department provides non-academic supports for students to facilitate equity in educational programming. We achieve this by multi-tiered supports for students in a variety of areas. Having students connect to their school environment has always been a crucial element of safe, equitable and supportive schools. COVID-19 has required us to provide additional layers of support for our students and our staff. Tonight, I'd like to review some of those supports. The onset of COVID-19 required us to forward plan supports for the students returning to our schools. We knew that the educational world that we would return to in August would not be the educational world we left in March for neither our teachers or our students. To address this situation, we implemented the 1, 2, 3 Connect plan. 1. Each principal was charged with ensuring that every student was paired with an adult who would be intentional in monitoring that student. 2. Counsellors and social workers expedited the needs assessments of each student and family. The information obtained drove planning for support and also our curriculum. 3, we recognise that our frontline staff may need additional skills and supports to address the new responsibilities, and so professional development and support was offered to each school. Not only did we realise that the school families would need support, both mayors together produced a video appealing to our community to support the school system as we work together to support our students and staff. Attendance has always had a great impact on educational progress for students. We know that students who feel connected to their schools have the best attendance. To address the questions that were sent to us about attendance, I would first like to define attendance and chronic absenteeism. Attendance is the percentage of students who attend school each day. A simplified measure of chronic absenteeism is the percentage of students who have missed 10% or more of their educational programme. This is excused and unexcused absences. There are other factors that are taken into consideration at the end of the year when the designation of chronic absenteeism is made. But here is an example. If 10 students have the opportunity to attend 10 school days, and one student misses 3 days, and one student misses 2 days, and 2 students miss 1 day each, the attendance rate would be 93%, 100 days minus the 7 days missed. The chronic absenteeism rate, though, would be 40%. 4 of our 10 students miss 10% or more of their attendance opportunity. So let's look at the attendance statistics for the first 45 days of the in-person population. As you can see, the categories rate for every racial category is over 90%. But the chronic absenteeism represents a large number of students who have missed 10% or more of their schooling. I'd like to put in a caveat for these statistics, because in the first few weeks of our school attendance, it was really sporadic. But we have settled down, and in the second 45 days, our in-person attendance is settling down and is falling close to within our 5-year average. So if we look at the virtual learners, again, we have attendance rates in the 90%. But again, we see that there are just over 2,000 students who have missed 10% or more of their schooling. And this last slide on attendance shows us that the combined numbers for all students. We knew that the pivot to virtual learning would have its challenges, especially for some of our families. So our schools, specifically social workers and counsellors, have worked to set up support for some of our most impacted families. Examples of some of the additional strategies implemented include: we partnered with community vendors to ensure that families had access to hotspots. We had additional parent nights for Hispanic families to work to review successful virtual learning. We provided interpreters to call our Burundi families. Our social workers did home and porch visits to assist families signing on to the computer when they were struggling with that. And we had additional supports and mentoring of students who had demonstrated attendance issues in previous years. So that's just to highlight a few of these examples that we have offered. I have a plea for families of our schools. Please keep your contact information up to date. If you change your phone number, please make sure that the school also has your phone number, because you may miss out on some important information if we don't have an accurate number. Another important foundational element of connectedness is being part of an environment that is culturally responsive. This year, Knox County Schools' cultural facilitator has worked to develop tiers of cultural support within our organisation. Tier 1 is foundational and is implemented across all settings. Tier 2 provides additional individualised supports for schools based on their needs and interests. And the third tier is a focus tier, where students and programs are provided focused supports to address specifically identified needs with accountability measures if needed. Since the beginning of the year, over 1,100 staff have been trained in Cultural Responsiveness 101, which is exploring your cultural lens. Over 100 have gone further and have been trained in Cultural Responsiveness 102, which is creating culturally responsive classrooms. So where are we headed now? What is next for us? Well, we are collaborating with the Department of Curriculum Instruction to create a more culturally responsive instructional practice. In a trauma-informed school, the adults in the school community are prepared to recognize and respond to those who have been impacted by traumatic stress. Those adults include administrators, teachers, and staff. In addition, students are provided with clear expectations and communication strategies to guide them through stressful situations. The goal is not only to provide tools to cope with extreme situations, but to create an underlying culture of respect, support, and safety. The state legislature recognized the importance of trauma-informed practices, and now House Bill 405 requires each LEA and public charter school to adopt a trauma-informed discipline policy that balances accountability with understanding of traumatic behaviour. Knox County has been working on these areas long before the House Bill was passed. We, a few years ago, created new discipline guidelines. We focused and increased our professional development for all staff. We have 7 schools that have been designated by the state as trauma-informed schools. We hired a trauma-informed training specialists, and we used restorative practices. In order to ensure that students have the skills needed to engage in appropriate behaviours within the school setting, we implement positive behavioural interventions and supports, PBIS. Much like the tiers of cultural responsiveness, PBIS has tiers of support and development. Tier 1 can be implemented in all classrooms and across all settings, and as needs arise or students demonstrate the need for more support, Tier 2 strategies would be implemented, and that would provide individualized, specific support for that student and support for the staff also. If the student continues to need additional supports, then Tier 3 supports would be provided, and these may include individual interventions or consideration of formalized evaluations. Knox County Schools has implemented PBIS for a number of years, but like with all things in this new educational world in which we operate this year, we knew that we needed additional supports. Early in the semester, we hired a virtual behavioural health facilitator to support students, teachers, and parents as they navigate their way through the virtual educational world. As this need for support increases, we have sought additional grant funding to provide additional virtual behavioural support personnel. The work of PBIS continues throughout the year. The district PBIS team provides professional development, fidelity monitoring, and training of new teachers. Some schools in the district have partnered with University of Knoxville and their RTI-2B program to provide additional supports and structures, and the UT provides us additional mentoring. This year, 3 Knox County schools were recognized by UT as demonstration schools. Central High School and Vine Middle were awarded status of RTI-2B Bronze School, while Holston Middle was again rewarded as an RTI-2B Silver Level demonstration school. I have spoken of the ways that we create connectedness within our district. This is critically important for the last support program that we implement, restorative practices. Unless we have a foundation of connectedness, students will not have something to restore back to. and the impact of restorative practices will be limited. The cycle of restorative practice is important. From a foundation of healthy, connected relationships, it provides strategies to teach students how to repair harm that they may have done and restore relationships. As individuals or classroom groups, it teaches conflict management skills and provides a larger framework of community for a student to assimilate to. Just as a behaviour has to be taught, how to resolve conflicts is a skill that not everyone has and therefore also needs to be taught. Restorative practices builds teams within schools. These teams help put emphasis on relationship building with accountability. Throughout the year, there have been ongoing restorative training for staff and individual supports for teachers. As with everything this year, the restorative staff have had to learn how to provide restorative conferences and supports in the virtual world. Each secondary school has at least one restorative staff member. But as the model for restorative practice has expanded, in Knox County Schools we have 6 schools providing a 3-person restorative team. These schools are Northwest Middle, Vine Middle, South Doyle Middle, Bearden Middle, Central High and Fulton High. These schools have a restorative assistant, a restorative intervention and a restorative liaison. These teams have provided students with hundreds of restorative experiences, restorative instruction or interventions, in order to support the restorative and behavioural choices of children, or just to celebrate the restorative and behavioural successes that they may have experienced. If the students require support within the restorative learning classroom, there is a structured process for that learning and support. Yet, as you can see from this chart, many students do not need that level of support, and the majority of the work is done outside the restorative classroom. These restorative interventions include a variety of supports, such as walk and talks, community building circles, check-in, check-outs, peer mediation, restorative conversations, and positive behavioural recognition. All of these supports and interventions have students making connection to each other and to their school community, while teaching them social-emotional skills and how to function within their group. Obtaining academic skills and behavioural skills is a parallel and sometimes symbiotic journey. In order to nurture and develop the whole child, we need to pay attention to both, provide instruction for both, and demonstrate equity in both. We have a lot of work to do to support the students of Knox County Schools, but we have an amazing team of educators who are working to make it happen. Thank you. I would like to turn the meeting back to Superintendent Thomas for his closing remarks.
Thank you, Ms. Cook, for your presentation. I'd like to thank all of our presenters this evening for the excellent job that they have done. I'd also like to thank our steering committee for all the work that they do with us and our co-chairs. So thank you, Toma. Thank you, Rosa. Appreciate you being here with us this evening. And we've talked about our strategic plan this evening, the goals of our strategic plan again, to increase academic achievement, eliminate disparities, and build a positive culture. And I think you've been able to see, hope you're leaving more informed than when you joined us earlier. I hope you see all the work that we're doing in those areas to make Knox County schools even greater. When we talk about disparities, I want to brag on our school district just a little bit. We do have the very best teachers and school administrators in our school system that work hard each and every day and care about all of our students, and our goal is just to get better each day and to work harder each day. And I couldn't be more proud of the accomplishments of our teachers, our administrators, our staff, and our students and parents who work hard to make sure that their child gets the very best educational opportunities. And we're going to continue to do that, and we're going to continue to address disparities, and we're going to use our strategic plan as our roadmap to continue to get better each and every day. So thank you so much for joining us this evening, and you may have questions. As I said earlier, there are questions we did not answer. We will provide answers for those questions on our website. DEO at knoxschools.org/DEO, I think. Anyway, it's on the screen there. But send in your questions. If you have additional questions, we want to answer those. So after the presentation's over, please don't hesitate to do that. And we will, in early January, hopefully, get the answers to your questions posted. And again, just thank you so much for joining us this evening, and hope everyone has a great rest of the evening. Thank you.